Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
After her husband's funeral, the widow found a strange key behind their wedding photo. Discovering what it opened, Tina stood at the wide-open window, inhaling the autumn morning freshness pouring in with delight. The day promised to be wonderful. Above the city stretched a dome of clear, blue sky, only seen during a fine autumn. Below, the long strands of birches glowed with bright autumn colors, with rowans and maples bursting amongst them like crimson fires. A huge flower bed, laid out under the windows of their building by the efforts of several local activists, displayed the beauty of autumn flowers, asters, zinnias, chrysanthemums. There might have been other plants, but Tina's knowledge of floriculture ended with those three names. The flower bed was magnificent, and every time she passed by, Tina would pause in awe, and in the morning, she invariably looked down from her fourth-floor window as if greeting all that beauty and joyfully reassuring herself that nothing had happened to it overnight. Today, she also glanced at the flower bed, which from above looked like a living, moving carpet woven from incredible colors not found in any artist's palette. But as soon as she returned to real life, the colors of the autumn morning instantly faded and began to irritate. Moreover, it was unclear why the sun was playing up and heating like in June, although it was already late September on the calendar. Circumstances and mood were completely out of sync with this bright, clean, light morning, its joyful purity. The freshness instantly turned cold and crept under Tina's clothes as an unpleasant chill. Annoyed, she slammed the window shut, turned on the kettle, sat on a kitchen chair, and clasped her head. How to comprehend a difficult, dreadful, melancholic day? The day of her husband Yvonne's funeral. And most importantly, how to live on after everything that had happened. How to explain the strange events that occurred to her afterward. How could she comprehend and decode the completely incomprehensible, unfathomable words of a stranger who approached her at the funeral? The water in the kettle had long since boiled, and it turned off with a loud click. But Tina, paying no attention to it, continued to sit, leaning on the countertop and staring at a golden curl on the wallpaper. The pattern, consisting of countless such curls, covered the walls, and as an old childhood habit, Tina traced the familiar lines with her eyes. It always helped her calm down, focus, or think something over. Her parents, knowing their daughter's habit, jokingly called such moments wallpaper pauses. Yvonne had also gotten used to her manner of sometimes stopping mid-sentence and staring at the wall, silently looking into space for a while. Indeed, these pauses often helped her. She began to understand how to act in one situation or another, as if spotting the necessary solution and way out here, among the little flowers, lines, and squares on the wall. It always worked, but not today. Today, all she managed to confirm was just how old and dirty the wallpapers in her apartment were and that it all needed to be taken down and replaced long ago. My God, what am I even thinking about? She's suddenly horrified at her own thoughts. Yvonne was just buried, and I first admired this silly flower bed. Now I'm thinking about some wallpapers. Have I gone mad? In a panic, she looked toward the closed door, behind which, just a couple of days ago, lay the coffin with her husband's body. Although it had long been taken out and buried, it still seemed to her that something terrible continued to happen in the room. And now, for 3 days, she hadn't once opened the door to the room, hadn't aired it, hadn't drawn the heavy dark curtains on the window. She just couldn't bring herself to think of Yvonne as someone who would never come home again, never look at her with his light smirk, never carelessly throw his sneakers in the middle of the hallway as usual, and never do anything from the thousand things that made up their life together, and as it turns out, her life in the past few years she lived with her husband. She kept waiting for the front door to bang open, and for him to walk into the apartment with his usual, "Well, hello, what's up? I could eat something." Her heart clenched, paused for a few moments, then started beating rapidly and frantically. Tina was frightened by everything: the empty apartment, the closed room door, Yvonne's house slippers still sitting on the shoe rack as if waiting for their owner to come home any moment, his favorite mug with a chipped edge that he wouldn't let Tina throw away despite her numerous attempts. She remembered the day she finally decided to do it and threw the mug into the trash, only to be astonished as she watched her husband grumbling angrily while fishing it out from beneath the potato peelings. Tina smiled at the memory and then, frightened, covered her mouth with her hands, as if someone could see her rebellious smile when she was supposed to be gloomy and sad, continuously crying. But what scared her most was the anticipation of a phone call that was supposed to explain the meaning of what was happening, help her understand the strange words spoken by a man she did not know, who, as it turned out, knew her husband well. The phone remained silent, and Tina couldn't decide whether she wanted it to ring or preferred to remain ignorant and live as before. Thoughtfully, she rested her chin on her stacked fists and closed her eyes, trying to find some clue in her past, both distant and recent. Tina Gill was born into a prosperous family. Her father, Ignacio, had taught some complex technical discipline at a university in the city for many years. When it suddenly became apparent that the country no longer needed so many engineers, Ignacio Gill, along with many other scientists, was practically left out on the street. However, unlike most of his respected educated colleagues who were completely unadapted to the new reality, Ignacio did not give up. He couldn't afford to, because he needed to provide for his family, his beloved wife Cecilia, and the newly born twins, Tina and Sergio, who were completely indifferent to both the overall situation in the country and their father's particular hardships. The kids were always hungry and continually outgrowing their clothes. Ignacio threw himself into supporting his family by all possible means. It turned out that in addition to his deep knowledge of mechanics, he had a talent for organization. Within a year, in partnership with an old friend, he opened a small business supplying and servicing equipment. Years passed, and the small company, initially crammed into one room with 2 desks and yellowing bulky CRT monitors, turned into a reputable firm with an office in the city center, a skilled young staff, and a stunningly beautiful receptionist who greeted visitors at the entrance. Ignacio continued to manage the company, now alone, as the fatal rule worked out: never mix money matters with friends, because either the business will fail or you will lose your friends. Fortunately, in their case, they managed to settle everything amicably, and the former partners parted quite satisfied with the situation. Ignacio took over the firm, and his friend, with whom he had founded and started the business, was paid a very generous sum. Throughout the time her husband transformed from a scholar to a businessman, Cecilia raised and educated their son and daughter, torn between household duties, a stressed husband, work, and 2 restless offspring who seemed committed from birth to outdo each other in mischief. When not competing, they enthusiastically combined their bubbling energy and doubled the fun. Of course, as they grew up, everything changed. Sergio's relentless activity found a venue in sports, while Tina immersed herself deeply in her studies. "Tina, dear, you're always studying, go take a walk," her mother would crack open the door and peek through the gap. "Mom, leave me alone." Tina would cut her off, adding sarcastically, "I don't want to see anyone out there, and certainly, no one wants to see me. There's already one beauty with our last name out there." Her mother would guiltily close the door and tiptoe away, though the girl was openly rude. The reason for Tina's terrible demeanor in her teenage years lay in her appearance, and having a brother only exacerbated the problem. From childhood, Tina and Sergio, to everyone's surprise, looked nothing alike. Sergio grew up as a gray-eyed, blonde angel, resembling their mother. As he grew older and actively engaged in sports, he broadened in the shoulders and turned into a handsome teenager with clear skin and romantically tousled blonde hair, which, combined with his gray-blue eyes, made him, according to schoolgirls, look almost like a young DiCaprio. Tina, on the other hand, clearly took after her father, inheriting his long nose, dark straight hair that seemed glued to her head, and unhealthy acne-prone skin. The only physical trait she shared with her handsome brother was her large, beautiful blue eyes, with a grayish, almost pearlescent sheen. The eyes were beautiful, but unfortunately, in Tina's opinion, they did nothing to compensate for everything else. Offended by nature, her parents, and by extension her brother for such an unfairly distributed gene pool, Tina retreated into gloomy solitude. "What are we going to do about Tina, huh?" Cecilia lamented at dinner, serving her husband a hot meal. Don't worry about it, Ignacio muttered, his thoughts still at home with contracts, supplies, and payments. She'll grow out of it eventually. What will pass? The woman asked, looking at her husband quizzically. What do you mean, what? Ignacio looked up at her, puzzled. What's Tina upset about? About her acne. Sorry, Cecilia, my fault. I've always had acne, as long as I can remember. How much money is needed? Should we take Tina to a dermatologist, or whatever it's called? Mom shook her head in bewilderment. I'm not going to any dermatologist, yelled 14-year-old Tina. I'll just sit here under your nose until I retire, and you can enjoy the view. Mom. Sergio's voice rang out in the hallway one evening. Mom, come out, will you? His voice, usually confident and demanding, carried some unusual notes. It sounded like he was afraid and hesitant to ask. Tina, usually confined to her room, listened involuntarily. Suddenly, she heard her mother's voice. No, Sergio, no, absolutely not. Have you lost your mind? You have endless training sessions. And you need to think about 9th grade. No, don't even look at me. Look at him instead. Look what he's doing. Besides the rather irritated voice of her mother, Tina could hear Sergio's pleading, muffled voice and another strange sound, like soft squeaking. Finally curious about what was happening on the other side of the wall, especially wanting to know what beloved Sergio had asked for that his mother had so sharply and categorically refused for perhaps the first time in Tina's memory. The girl stepped out of her room into the hallway and froze. A light brown bundle was scampering between Sergio's legs with a thin, quivering stick instead of a tail. Come on, Mom. Sergio continued to whine. Don't think it's a mongrel. It's a real boxer. You know his mother's pedigree. It's just that this one was born the wrong color. That's why Victor gave him to me. Just gave him to me. For free. Not for money, as a friend. Come on, Mom. Sergio, please stop begging. I know you very well. In a few days, this puppy will be hanging on me, and I have enough on my plate with you all. Mom, please let us keep him. It will be my dog, suddenly sounded in the hallway. Cecilia fell silent and looked at her daughter. Tina, kneeling down, smiled at the puppy, which was suspiciously sniffing the shoes. Her usually grim, tense face smoothed, brightened with a smile, and suddenly became almost pretty. The woman looked hesitantly at the puppy again, at the yellowish fragrant puddle creeping from under it, then at her daughter's happy face, and waved her hand. I just couldn't say no, you understand, she explained to her astonished husband that evening, who was quite surprised after just discovering his somehow wet and seemingly chewed sock under the kitchen table. You'll understand when you see Tina. She's literally glowing. Look, she's walking that rascal from the walk, just look. Hello, Dad. For the first time in many months, Tina greeted her father first, smiling broadly and joyfully at him. Meet Archie. You don't mind the puppy, do you? She looked at Ignacio, and of course, he, like his wife, didn't have the heart to refuse her. As their mother had predicted, Sergio quickly lost interest in dog breeding and got busy with his endless activities. The puppy became entirely Tina's responsibility and occupied all her thoughts. A few days later, she was trying to drag the growing puppy home after a walk. The puppy actively resisted and absolutely refused to climb the stairs by himself. Tina awkwardly grabbed the resisting Archie by the front paws and tried to lift him. The puppy whined and struggled. Hey, what are you doing? Who carries puppies like that? A voice called out from above her. One floor up stood a tall, thin boy who, as far as she remembered, was a year older than her and Sergio. He looked down at her and her attempts to manage the puppy, seriously and not very friendly. Try as she might, she couldn't recall his name, although his family had lived in the same building as the Gills for many years. And he definitely had a dog. Tina remembered well, often admiringly watching the large German shepherd proudly walking beside its owner. You can't drag dogs like that, especially such small ones. You'll make his back crooked and dislocate his leg. And he's such a handsome fellow. Lift him correctly." The boy quickly ran down the stairs and stood close by. "How should I do it?" Tina was flustered. "I just don't know. He just ended up with us. I hardly know anything about dogs." She became completely embarrassed and blushed. "Well, basically, watch and learn." He leaned down and skillfully slid one hand under the puppy's chest and the other under its tail, then easily picked it up, holding it close. "Like this, see? Now you try." "No, not like that. Look, put 3 fingers together and slide them under his chest. Hold the paws with your thumb and forefinger. Yes, look, if he jerks, you'll drop him, you could break something. Come on, try. Don't rush, hold him tighter, be more confident. The dog needs to feel your confidence, you understand? It needs to know you're the master. The mistress. Yes, that's right. See, it's not so hard." Tina stood, holding Archie comfortably and calmly in her arms, and smiled contentedly. "After the master class," the boy said. "Well, see you around." "Thank you so much," she said, pausing awkwardly, which he correctly understood. "Yago, my name is Yago," he looked at her and added. "And you, Tina, I know. If you want, come to the playground behind the garages this evening. We hang out there with the dogs in the evenings. You probably have lots of questions. I can help with what I can." "Yes, I'll come, definitely, thank you." She was so joyful she became flustered. Finally, she was becoming part of a group where people were connected by a common interest. And, to be honest, the guy was quite attractive. "Is he vaccinated?" suddenly asked the boy, who had already started descending. "He what?" Tina asked, not understanding. "Has the puppy been vaccinated?" He looked at the novice dog owner suspiciously. "Oh, I don't know," she flustered. "Wow, you really need to find out." He even got a little angry. "Such things need to be clarified first. Where did you get the puppy? From whom? He's at least 3 months old, no less. He should have had his vaccinations." "No, this is impossible. I'll have to take you under my wing, or else you'll ruin the little guy." Yago truly took Tina and the little boxer under his wing. From him, Tina learned a great deal about caring for and training a puppy. Listening to Yago's instructions, she quietly horrified herself, realizing that she had done everything wrong from the first day, and only by some miracle had Archie not suffered from her inexperienced handling. A few months later, Tina was already adeptly managing Archie, who was gradually becoming a beautiful, strong dog. They spent every day walking together at the dog park, then taking as long as possible to return home to discuss a host of topics and problems. Tina and Yago became friends. He turned out to be a very interesting conversationalist, knew a lot about various things, sometimes simply stumping Tina with his interesting thoughts, quite unexpected for a 15-year-old boy. "Archie, come here, you scaredy cat." Tina yelled at the dog, seeing how the puppy shook his head frantically, trying to dodge a large menacingly buzzing beetle. "Archie can't be a coward," Yago noted. "And why is that?" Tina was surprised. "You named the dog and don't even know what his name means," Yago sighed. "It doesn't mean anything," the girl shrugged. "Just a name, that's all." "Tina, there are no just names. And anyway, every word means something. You know, if people knew the meaning of all words, I think there would be much less empty chatter. Archie actually means brave, daring, bold." "Do you really believe all that?" Tina was amazed. "Well, believe or not believe, that's a complicated question. But in any case, before you believe in something or deny it, you need to know it, understand it, think about it, right? It's easy to deny what you don't understand. And about names, you know, look at you and you'd believe in onomastics." "In what?" Tina was astonished. "Onomastics," Yago seriously repeated the funny and unfamiliar word. It's the study of names, an interesting thing, by the way. Did you know, for example, that your name indicates royal lineage? Tina looked at Yago skeptically, yet she was terribly intrigued. You don't know, the boy sighed again. Tina is from the line of Tatiana, and Titus Tatius was an ancient Italian king. By the way, quite a cruel fellow. So it turns out, Tina, you are essentially a ruler and a tyrant. Well, that's true. Always, according to you, things go your way. Take me, for example, I have a chemistry quiz tomorrow. I'm clueless about acids, as they say, and instead of going to prepare, here I am chatting with you. Well, are you also some kind of great or wise man? Tina asked slyly, stunned by the interpretation of her name. Me, Yago laughed. No way, I'm just simple. Yago just means supplanter. So, madam, that's why you get to push me around as you please. Tina burst into laughter, and Yago joined in. After a while, Tina began to notice his special look at her, thoughtful, tender. It seemed to embrace and envelop her, awakening in her feelings and excitement she herself did not fully understand. Tina would return home, lock herself in the bathroom, and sit there, staring at her face in the mirror, trying to understand if there was something about her that could genuinely captivate a young man like Yago, or if it was all just a product of her overactive imagination. She sat there, pondering these critical questions until Sergio would start banging loudly on the door, demanding to be let in. Tina decided to invite Yago to her 17th birthday party. She was sure he would gratefully accept her invitation. But, for some reason, he smiled and then shook his head. Tin, don't be mad at me, okay? I really appreciate the invitation, but I truly can't make it. She was terribly hurt that he wouldn't come. She had so wanted to bring him to her birthday party and show everyone a young man who was mature, serious, intelligent, and attractive. Maybe, if she was lucky, he would look at her with that thoughtful, tender gaze that made her shiver. Maybe he would even take her hand, and then everyone would understand, they couldn't help but understand, that Tina Guild had a real boyfriend. Or almost had one, but details weren't that important. And now this magical plan was falling apart because of Yago's stubbornness. Well, go wherever you have to go then. I only invited you out of politeness, didn't really want to, she shouted, hating herself for the words. He looked at her deeply and sadly, shook his head, and walked away. Tina, frustrated, kicked a twig lying on the path and slumped down on a bench near the entrance. Imagine that, he has things to do, grumbled a hurt Tina, ignoring the old neighbor lady sitting on the bench. So much for calling himself a friend, just go away, I didn't even really want you to come. Are you grumbling about Yago? The neighbor suddenly asked. What's it to you? Tina snapped. If he acts like a jerk, am I supposed to keep quiet? I invited him to my birthday, and he turns up his nose, too busy, he says. If Yago says he's busy, then he's busy, the woman cut off. You should know, he doesn't have much time. Why should I know that? What am I supposed to know? Tina blurted out unintentionally. The conversation developed in such a way that she even forgot she was supposed to be mad at Yago and not at all interested in what was related to him. Goodness, the woman threw up her hands. You two hang out together, and you apparently don't know anything about your own friend. Who hangs out? What friend? Tina, suddenly forgetting her recent idea to present Yago as her boyfriend, started to defend herself fiercely. We are not a couple. He's not that important to me. Just asked him to come over Sunday evening. Suddenly, he has urgent business. Imagine that, such a busy man. Tina again began to repeat what she had already said earlier. I can just imagine what kind of business. Probably some girl. You're right, the neighbor said mockingly. Even two, yes, two girls. He's always thinking about them, running after them, bringing them home, even putting them to bed. What? Tina whispered, shocked. It seems you really don't know anything about our Yago, the woman shook her head. He has two younger sisters. Yago is fully responsible for them. How could he come to your birthday if he needs to take his youngest sister Nora to her art classes on Sunday evening? Why does he have to be the one to take her? She asked, recalling having seen a small curly-haired child with awkwardly tied funny ponytails often with Yago. It doesn't have to be him, the neighbor smirked. But Yago wouldn't trust his precious girls with anyone else. He hovers over them like a hen with chicks. Well, I understand about strangers, but what about their parents? Why can't they? Tina protested. The woman looked at her strangely, as if she were seeing a bizarre creature, and sighed heavily. I will never understand how you all live like this, what kind of people you are, she shrugged. It's like you have sacks over your heads. You don't see anything around you, don't notice, don't even know anything about each other. And you've lived in the same building for so many years. How is that possible? I'm just amazed. No, Yago and his girls don't have parents. Well, almost don't, she stunned Tina. Their father died, their mother nearly drank herself to death. So now Yago is both father and mother to those girls. He lives, trembling, fearing someone will take his sisters away. Take them away? Tina whispered. It's simple. Yago is a minor. No one will grant him guardianship of his sisters. So, as the time for the next committee review approaches, he runs around the whole building, begging us to confirm that everything is okay at home, and that Vivian, well, their mother, is also fine. So, we all lie together as a building, and the ladies from the committee pretend to believe us. That's how we live, all honest people. She laughed, but there was no mirth in it. Tina, utterly shocked, tried to digest the information. Yago, her essentially only friend with whom she had spent so much time over the last 3 years, was living a hard life, completely incomprehensible to her and to most other people. Foolish her, sometimes complaining to him about how hard it was with Archie, how he regularly kept her from sleeping properly, wreaking havoc at home. Like how he'd chew up Mom's boot, inevitably picking the most expensive one from the pile. Or steal some incredibly important contract from Dad's briefcase. Or slobber all over her brother's sneakers. It's so hard with him, she would sigh, telling Yago about Archie's latest antics. It's just like having a little child. Yago would sigh and nod understandingly, sharing her troubles with caring for a canine youngster, while he himself was handling 2 actual little ones, his sisters, 7-year-old Nora and 10-year-old Maria. She learned all these details from her mother, who, like the rest of the residents of the building, was concerned about the fate of the girls, bringing them clothes Tina had outgrown, feeding them when possible, and participating in the committee reviews of the troubled family. Yago, he's a wonderful boy, her mother told her. Yes, he is wonderful, Tina readily agreed. The next day, Tina patiently waited for her friend at the entrance. Eventually, he approached, fast-paced and laden with bags like a Christmas tree with garlands. Hello, Tina squeaked. Hello, he muttered, passing by. Yago, listen, she quickly said to his back, terribly afraid that he would disappear behind the entrance door. Forgive me. Yago, I didn't know anything. Well, I knew you had sisters, but I didn't know that you. Yago, you are a heroic person, and I am just a fool, albeit of royal descent. He stopped and turned around. A joyful boyish smile lit up his face. Yago, can I help you, please? I really don't know much, but I can learn, Tina babbled. Thank you, Yago finally spoke. Thank you, Tina, but there's nothing heroic about my life. They're my sisters, how could it be any other way? They are amazing, you know. Maria, she's so smart, reads everything. And she remembers what she needs and what she doesn't, he laughed. She's almost top of her class in almost all subjects, just a bit weak in math. And Nora, she's our artist. When she was little, she drew all over the apartment. We had her paintings everywhere, on the walls, on the fridge, on dishes, even on the TV screen. Basically, we lived in an art gallery. I take her to an art studio now. You know, they say she's got talent. Tina watched Yago with wide eyes. In more than 3 years of nearly daily meetings, she had never seen him so animated. Talking about his sisters, he jumped up from the bench where he had been sitting, dropped the bags on the ground, and used his hands to help describe them, his eyes sparkling, his voice louder than usual. He seemed to glow with pride. Tina suddenly thought how petty and insignificant the concerns of his peers, and even her own, were in comparison, and she wanted to help him even more. "Oh, Yago, want me to help Maria with math, since you're busy?" "No, really, let's do it, please," she pleaded with her friend. "Well, actually, that would be nice," he agreed. "Only, I'm not sure." He hesitated, and Tina realized he didn't want to bring her to their apartment because of his mother. "Maria can come to us," she quickly suggested. "It would even be more convenient. It's quiet in my room, no one will disturb us. Sergio is out all day, and my parents are at work. So no problem. We can start tomorrow, okay?" Yago looked at Tina gratefully and nodded. From then on, that became the routine. Serious beyond her years, Maria would come down the stairs at exactly 3 o'clock and ring the Gills' apartment bell. Archie would always greet her at the entrance, after which she'd sit down at Tina's desk, open her notebook and textbook, and focus intently on her tutor. Tina turned out to be quite a capable teacher, and by the next quarter, Maria had earned a solid A in her least favorite subject, math. Their joint joy knew no bounds. In a burst of gratitude, Yago even hugged Tina tightly and then, blushing, quickly let her go. Tina, instantly turning red as a tomato from embarrassment, awkwardly adjusted her collar. Yago began in a hoarse voice and, after clearing his throat, continued. "I've been wanting to tell you, and, well, you. Darn it, basically, Tina, I really like you, that's all." "I like you too, Yago," Tina quietly replied, and she was overwhelmed by a warm wave of her first real adult happiness. "It looks like Tina has fallen in love," Cecilia informed her husband at breakfast. "But that's a secret, so don't spill the beans." "Some secret," Sergio snorted from the table. "That secret is known all around. They were walking yesterday, oblivious to everyone else, smiling at each other like two fools, amidst kids and dogs. It was a total circus on a walk." "Who's smiling? What kids?" Ignacio looked puzzled from wife to son and back. "It's Yago and Artina, who else? Everyone knows they're an item. So, dear parents, we might be planning a wedding soon, we'll dance, eat some salads," Sergio teased. "Quiet down, chatterbox," Cecilia lightly tapped him on the head with a laugh. Sergio, grabbing a sandwich, dashed out of the kitchen, and Ignacio looked thoughtfully at Cecilia. "So, that's how it is?" "Well, Cecilia, are you sure this is all right? They're only 17, a bit early, and what if they do something foolish? And besides, they should be thinking about their studies." Cecilia laughed easily and cheerfully. "Well, first off, 17 is quite old enough, Ignacio. Remember how old you were when you first hit on me? Yago is about the same age now as you were then. And secondly, they won't do anything foolish, I'm sure of it. Yago won't allow it. Yago, he's such a, how do I put it? Well, he's actually much older in reality than his age, you know? The boy has been through so much at his age that many adults wouldn't experience in a lifetime. And I'm completely calm about Tina. Yago has an amazing effect on her. You're gobbling down those cheesecakes, your fifth one, I see, tasty? Very, thank you, darling, Ignacio nodded. Well, you shouldn't thank me but your daughter Tina, she made them this morning. And guess who taught her? Yago, Cecilia laughed. Imagine, I couldn't make her learn to cook, but he managed it just like that. As time went on, Tina graduated from high school and enrolled in university. By then, Yago was already in his second year of college, simultaneously working and still carrying the load of caring for his two sisters and ailing mother. Maria had grown almost into an adult, not losing any of her seriousness, and was terrifyingly independent. Nora had also grown up and was passionately attending art school. All this time, Tina and Yago were seeing each other, seizing every opportunity. And now, they had many more opportunities. To celebrate her university admission and the start of her independent adult life, her parents gave Tina a lavish gift, a separate 2-bedroom apartment. And, of course, this fact could not but influence Tina and Iago's relationship. However, his reaction to her having her own separate apartment puzzled Tina quite a bit. "Yep, the apartment is certainly excellent," he said with a downcast look, glancing around, "no doubt about that. But what am I supposed to do now?" "What do you mean?" Tina asked, puzzled. "Well, I wanted to be worthy of you, to start earning seriously, to buy an apartment, or even better, a house, so that you could live there with me. But now, why would you need me?" "Yago, what are you talking about?" she laughed. "Such nonsense. What does it matter where this apartment comes from and who bought it? We're going to live here together." "No way." Yago shook his head stubbornly and stood up decisively from the stool. "You see, I'm not going to live off your father. I need to provide for my own family. Understand, Tina, I have nothing, and I simply can't demand anything from others. I need to do it all myself. Just wait for me a little, please." "Well, Yago, you know, by the time you buy an apartment or even more so a house, we'll be old, and it'll be rather pointless to start a family then," the girl smirked. Yago looked at Tina with a long, piercing gaze, clearly wanting to say something, even opened his mouth, but at the last moment remained silent. Tina convincing herself of her own righteousness, thought Tina. "See, my father's neck doesn't suit him. If he had his way, he would have moved me into his apartment, then he'd be pleased." In her opinion, Yago was unbearably old-fashioned with his views on life. And suddenly she found herself bored with his devoted, timid, and overly proper love. "Yago, this isn't going to work," she finally told him, looking into his eyes full of pain and surprise. "But I love you, Tina," he said, bewildered. "So what? You love me, what next? Am I supposed to sit next to your mother and wait until you start earning properly? Maybe then we'll start drinking together waiting for a better life." "Tin, why are you like this?" he asked in a whisper. She wished he would jump up, yell, maybe even hit her. It would have been easier that way. "You know, Yago, we've been friends since childhood. Let's just leave it at that." Agreed, she tried to end the conversation on a positive note. "No, sorry," he shook his head. "I can't just be friends with you. I love you too much. If you ever need me, call, and I'll come. Goodbye." They never saw each other again. Returning to visit her parents, who, despite having money and opportunities, stubbornly refused to move from the house that had truly become their home, she occasionally encountered someone from their family, including Yago himself, limiting herself to light nods and a meaningless hello. Only Nora, now a grown, beautiful girl, would throw herself at Tina with joyful cries. "Hey, Tina, why don't you visit us anymore? Did you know we have puppies, and my paintings were accepted for an exhibition, and Yago brought us a new TV yesterday? It's huge, like half the wall." Ivan appeared in her life in the middle of her 5th year at university, transferring from another city. He simply sat next to her, smiled confidently, and said, extending his hand, "My name is Ivan. You're clearly the most attractive and smart girl here, so if you don't mind, I'd like to court you. If you don't like me, just tell me, I'll understand." Tina spent the next lecture stunned by what her new acquaintance had said. Her romance with Ivan developed rapidly. "Tina, I really like you," he soon said. "I will do everything to make you happy. Marry me. We have a place to live, and we'll manage everything else ourselves." That's what a man should be like. Decisive, without silly complexes and prejudices, Tina suddenly thought. Without this idiotic and unnecessary meticulousness. After the wedding, they settled in Tina's apartment and led a perfectly normal and ordinary life, at least from the outside. But somehow, after 6 months, she painfully realized the loss, the great deception, the mistake. And all of it she had done herself, she had deceived herself. Ivan was a flawless husband, caring and considerate, washed the dishes, cleaned up after himself, gave her flowers, and took her out to restaurants on special occasions. At night, he was gentle, but all of it lacked the main thing that turns two people into the dearest and most desired to each other, that makes any activity, even the most boring and senseless one, interesting simply because a man and a woman are truly together. Their life lacked love, and everything else without it became meaningless. Even in moments of closeness, Tina could not shake off the feeling that her husband was performing some kind of mandatory program, a spousal duty in the literal sense of the word. They also had little to talk about. Yes, Ivan had no need for that. He was quite satisfied with a brief exchange of a few words upon meeting, and the rest of the time the TV was enough for him. And Tina could not help remembering a time in her life when there was no shortage of desire to talk, nor of topics for conversation, and even a dog's nickname gave rise to an interesting discussion. "Ivan, maybe we should go on a vacation somewhere," she asked her husband. "Where? Are you kidding, Tina? That's just a waste of money. Let's rather change the TV, I've just spotted the right one. You know, Tina, we'll definitely go traveling and walk around all of Europe on our own, holding hands," suddenly echoed in her head a distant and almost forgotten voice. More and more often she asked herself the same question: what am I doing next to a person who is a stranger to me? We are completely unnecessary to each other. If one of us suddenly disappears, the other might not even notice it. Just look around surprised, realizing something is missing. Shrugs and calmly continues to live. "Ivan, don't you think something's wrong with us?" she dared to talk to her husband one day. "What?" He was surprised and reluctantly tore himself away from the TV screen. "What are you talking about?" "Nonsense. Drop it. Everything's fine with us." This meant that there would be no help from Ivan, so everything had to be resolved and done by herself. But how terrifying it was to just take and destroy her such well-organized, customary, peaceful life. And then everything resolved itself on its own. What happened simply could not have happened with Ivan, so careful, weighing every step and action, crossing the street only on a green light, and drinking a glass of water every morning for healthy digestion. He absurdly died. He decided to swim in a small, seemingly safe river. Tina stood at her husband's fresh grave, then slowly walked to her car. All these days she mercilessly scolded herself for her callousness, indifference, lack of real, sincere grief that makes one cry and tear their hair out in despair. Her feelings were calm and measured. She deeply grieved that Ivan, a strong and smart man, had left so early and so absurdly, but she did it without drama, without hysteria, and without rolling her eyes. "Maybe I'm heartless," she kept asking herself again and again. "And maybe you never really loved each other? Maybe, as cynical as it sounds, Ivan's death means your freedom," her heart whispered to her. The day after the funeral, a short man in dark sunglasses approached her on the street. "Tina, hello." The man coughed awkwardly, glanced around uncertainly, and as if deciding on something, continued. "We don't know each other, but given the circumstances, I find myself compelled to make your acquaintance. I had some dealings with your husband, a joint project, so to speak. It's extremely awkward to bother you at a time like this, but I must. Time waits for no one. I need documents that Ivan took from me shortly before his passing. Just before it all happened, you understand?" "No, honestly, I don't understand." Tina shook her head and pressed her palms to her temples. "To be frank, I don't see how I can help you. If you had some dealings that I knew nothing about, then I certainly don't know about any documents Ivan allegedly took from you. And really, if I may say, it's strange to hear that Ivan had any dealings." She emphasized the last word in her sentence. The man looked at her oddly and shrugged slightly. "Yet, Tina." He seemed to find confidence and spoke more assertively. "I would really appreciate it if you could look for the papers I mentioned at home. They are easily distinguishable from other documents, all printed on Technocom Company letterhead. Remember this name. Please check it home, and I promise to compensate you for your efforts. Basically, I'll pay you. I think you could use the money right now. Remember, please, the company Technocom. It's an easy name to remember. I know your home phone and will call you in 2 days with your permission. Agreed? Anyway, he added, clearly embarrassed by her persistent silence, I will call you either way, without your permission. Sorry about that. Tina watched the man carefully. He muttered something else and looked down as he walked away. She didn't need to remember the company name the strange man had mentioned. She had known that word since childhood, heard it nearly every day. It was her father's company. What did this mean? Why was a complete stranger so persistently and unequivocally interested in her father's papers, moreover, willing to pay for them? And why did he claim that these documents were with Ivan, or rather, had been with him while he was alive and now just lay somewhere in their home? Her husband had never shown interest in her father's business, though he always spoke highly of him and always emphasized his respect. It's too complicated for me, he would smile when her father's firm came up in conversation. Patents, contracts, certificates, warranties, Ivan would list with a horrified face. I'm a simple man, I tighten screws, lay cables, at most solder a circuit. That's all my knowledge, and frankly, I don't want people whispering behind my back, look, there he goes, doesn't understand a thing about the business, but gets paid because he's the son-in-law. And now it turned out that Ivan had been involved in the company's affairs and not just interested in them, but had collected and kept some documents, obviously important if they were willing to pay money for them. Clearly, the man who approached her today didn't realize she was the owner's daughter of Technocom. Otherwise, he would never have made such an offer. Well, of course, she had Ivan's surname. Knowing his caution and secrecy, he probably hadn't mentioned that she was Guild by birth. Lord, what does all this mean? Unable to find the answers she needed, Tina stood up, stretched her stiff back from sitting too long, and walked back to the window. The phone call, which she had been anticipating for 2 days, still came unexpectedly. She jumped in fright, her breath catching. The phone kept ringing. She slowly walked over, took a deep breath, and picked up the receiver. Tina, hello. The voice was demanding, and there was no doubt that it was the same man who had approached her after the funeral. How about our agreement? Did you find the documents? Well, here's the thing. Tina suddenly found her confidence and spoke as firmly as her caller. I haven't found anything yet, but I am still looking. I need more time. Call me. Wait, let me think. Tomorrow evening. That's all. She ended the conversation hearing the man trying to say something and hung up. A few seconds later the phone rang demandingly again. Tina reached out and pulled the phone cord from the socket. Where to look? And how is this done anyway? And where in their apartment could documents be hidden? What do they write in detective stories? If you want to hide something, put it in plain sight. Where's the easiest place to hide papers? Of course, among other papers. Tina began methodically removing books and albums from the shelves of the large wall-high bookcase. After half an hour, it became clear that there was nothing suspicious here. Besides, why did she even think the documents were at home? And to be completely honest, how did she know that this strange, mysterious story wasn't just made up from beginning to end? Why should she believe this strange person she'd seen for the first time in her life? Maybe he was insane? Maybe he was slandering Yvonne, trying to tarnish his memory? She tried with all her might to convince herself that she had no reason to suspect her late husband of anything dishonest. But the inner voice, at first barely audible, a faint whisper, then louder and louder, said, "He could have, quite easily, and anyway, are you sure you knew the person you lived with for several years well enough?" Her memory helpfully presented her with memories she didn't like returning to, but which it had preserved carefully, just in case. A year after their wedding, Cecilia and Ignacio were preparing for a vacation to some faraway exotic islands and invited the children along. Oh, come on, Dad, Tina laughed. I know how much it costs. No, we'll manage. Don't be upset, Dad. I can't fly anyway, there's a lot of work. But you and Mom definitely go. Finally have some rest together. Why did you refuse the trip? Yvonne asked cautiously when they were alone. If I understood correctly, your father was going to pay for everyone? That's exactly why I refused, Tina exclaimed, surprised that she even had to explain it. I heard my father's company is having some troubles now, so it doesn't make sense for him to spend extra money. Is your brother going? Yvonne asked for some reason. I don't know. Probably, but that's his business, Tina shrugged. Well, yeah, of course, her husband nodded, and the conversation ended. A couple of years into their married life. Tina, don't you think it's time we thought about getting a bigger apartment? Yvonne asked unexpectedly. Why? Is this one too cramped for you? Well, just in general. He waved his fingers vaguely in the air. Well, let's think about it, she suggested cheerfully, and after a few seconds, laughing out loud, she joked, I thought about it. No ideas, honestly, other than to beg Dad for money. Well, that's not such a bad idea, Yvonne said cautiously. Yvonne, come on, Tina said, genuinely surprised. Dad already provided me with an apartment, and you too, technically. If something's not good enough, we should manage it ourselves. Though I don't see the point since you keep saying it's too early to talk about kids, for some reason. The topic was painful. Tina wanted a real family, she wanted to give birth, to nurse, to raise a child, but Yvonne persistently asked her not to rush, to get on their feet, to save money, and cited 1,000 more reasons why they needed to wait to have a child. But at every mention of it, Tina grew sad, and Yvonne hurried to end the conversation. Nevertheless, here and there, clearly or vaguely, barely perceptibly, little signs kept appearing to Tina, not direct, but definite evidence that Yvonne, her husband, wouldn't mind arranging his life at the expense of her wealthy father. Tina felt ashamed of her involuntary thoughts, hated herself for them, called herself a fool, but she couldn't help it. That's how she lived, next to a person whose thoughts and desires became more and more of a mystery to her. Having gone through the bookshelf and the box where they kept documents, receipts, user manuals for appliances, and a pile of other paper junk, she plopped down on the sofa and looked around the room. Across from her, on the wall, hung a large framed photograph. It was their wedding photo with Yvonne. In it, they were holding hands, eyes wide open, pretending they were about to jump. The photo was funny, and Tina liked it very much. Only now, for some reason, it was hanging a bit crooked. She got up, walked over to the wall, straightened the frame, and, just as she was about to turn away, returned to the photo. She noticed that the frame wasn't lying flush against the wall, but was slightly pushed out, as if something was behind it. Tina took the photograph and, moving it aside, looked at the back. There, taped to the frame, was a small, nearly flat key. The woman sat on the sofa and stared at the small metal object lying in her palm. So, she had found the key that had been cleverly hidden from her. And hidden by Yvonne, no doubt. Perhaps this was the answer to the mystery that had been tormenting her? Or rather, not the answer, but the way to it. Tina examined the key carefully. Too small for a door, but too large for a jewelry box or briefcase. And then she realized. In Yvonne's garage, there was a small safe. Tina had never been interested in what he kept there. Half an hour later, she was sitting in her kitchen again, and in front of her on the table lay several neatly stacked and clipped packs of documents. They all directly related to her father's company. In essence, it was an almost complete overview of his work over the past 3 years. Copies of contracts and founding documents, payment statements, inspection reports, and much more. All the documents were printed, except for one sheet written by hand. Tina easily recognized her late husband's handwriting. It was something like a detailed plan for a hostile takeover of the company. Her eyes caught words like loan agreement, debt repurchase, bankruptcy. A cold shiver ran down Tina's spine. It turned out that Yvonne had been working his way toward her father's business for years, and she was merely a cover. And if it weren't for his accidental and ridiculous death, he would have eventually achieved his goal. And she would have been the only one to blame for it all. After all, it was thanks to her that he wormed his way into their family and obviously assessed the prospects. Or maybe he had planned all this long before, perhaps even before meeting her. Maybe he met her precisely to carry out his plan? All these thoughts that overwhelmed her almost drove her mad. It was clear that Yvonne never intended to work at Gil's company, which was why he categorically refused such an opportunity, citing his own incompetence, lack of understanding of business processes, and finally, moral inconvenience. He really didn't intend to work there, he intended to own it all. It remained a mystery how Yvonne planned to get Sergio, her brother and the main heir of the company, out of his way. But that secret he took with him to the grave. All the lies and filth that suddenly came to light with the help of that small key left her gasping for breath. What should she do? Immediately run to her father, to Sergio. Yes, of course, she would tell them everything, because Yvonne surely had people inside the company gathering all that information for him. And she needed to find the person who had approached her about the documents. But that would come later, for now, she felt too miserable. She was crushed, destroyed, humiliated, and in desperate need of help, yet no one could help her. Wait, why no one? There was someone who could help her. How did he say goodbye to her back then? If you need me, call, and I'll come. And he added, it seemed, that he would always love her. Or did she imagine that? No, he definitely said something about love. In any case, she had Yago. With her heart pounding, she dialed his number and nearly dropped the receiver when she heard that familiar, beloved, soft voice. Yago, she said uncertainly. Hello, Tina, he replied evenly and calmly, as if they had parted just the night before, as if years hadn't passed, and she hadn't said those awful words to him the last time they met. Oh, Yago. She hesitated, struggling to find the right words. I'm so glad to hear you, so, how's life? Thank you, it's good. I'm really glad to hear from you too, Tina, really glad. There was genuine happiness in his voice. Yago, maybe we could meet? It's been so long. I mean, I'd like to, well. She completely lost track and fell silent. Suddenly, she felt an excitement she hadn't experienced in years. Of course, let's meet. I'd love to see you, he agreed simply. They arranged the time and place. Tina hung up the phone and went to the mirror. Pressing her hands to her flushed cheeks, she looked at her reflection and suddenly said aloud, You love him, fool, you love your Yago and always have. And this admission to herself suddenly filled her with a long-forgotten sense of happiness. The whole time leading up to the meeting felt like she was in a fever. Had she aged over the years? How should she put on her makeup to make herself look good for him? What should she wear? Something light and casual, or maybe something a bit more formal but still festive. In any case, she needed to dress in a way that showed she was in great shape, that her figure was still slim and light. And her hairstyle? Should she do something special or let her hair fall naturally? Suddenly, she stopped. My God, what was she thinking? Why all this? After all, this was her Yago. And he never cared how her hair looked or what she wore. Listening to her heart pounding, she approached the table in the cafe. A tall, slender man rose to greet her. It was Yago, who seemed incredibly handsome and stylish to her. Any moment now, he'd smile and rush toward her, then hug her tightly and say, Finally, you've come back to me, my love, I've waited all these years just for you. He stepped toward her and smiled, but instead of the impulsive, passionate, and impatient hug she had imagined, he extended his hand to her. A wedding ring gleamed on his finger. You're married? She asked, even though it was already clear. Yes, I'm married and very happy. I have 2 wonderful kids, a job I love, and 2 dogs, he said, still smiling, as if stripping away all her silly dreams one by one, dropping them to the ground. And I also have my dear childhood friend who, judging by everything, needs help, right? She heard him say. She found herself already sitting at the table, tears streaming down her cheeks, and Yago, so familiar and close, yet entirely unreachable to her. Yago, whom she had found again only to lose. He was sitting next to her, mumbling something, and wiping her eyes with paper napkins. Don't cry, if you're in trouble, we'll fix it. I promise you, now stop crying and tell me everything, and we'll figure out what to do together. A wave of gratitude overwhelmed Tina. Yes, she had lost her love, betraying it once, but she had learned to value true feelings. Thanks to Yago, she suddenly understood a truth so simple that it is often not taken seriously. Nothing should be done without love.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.